Ferrari has pushed its diffuser design to the absolute limit of the regulations in the second week of testing in Bahrain, and now the FIA has set off the alarm by launching an investigation that could completely change the technical balance before the season even officially starts. And now I ask you the direct question bluntly, has Ferrari found a brilliant loophole, or is it about to pay the price for playing too close to the fire? Because what happened in the second week of testing in Bahrain was not just another aerodynamic adjustment. It was not a minor piece. It was a surgical move in the most sensitive area of the car, the diffuser. A modification that, seen in conjunction with the new rear profiles and the integration with the impact structure, made the FIA go from silence to deep scrutiny. And when the FIA stops observing and starts investigating, it's because something doesn't quite add up. Ferrari is not accused of illegality, yet. But when we talk about borderline concepts, gray areas of the regulations and possible technical reinterpretations, we are entering dangerous territory. Territory where a technical directive can erase with a stroke of the pen an advantage gained in the wind tunnel. Terrain where a millimeter detail can make the difference between fighting for the championship or starting the season with the handbrake on. Today we are going to break down exclusively what happened in that second week in Bahrain. What the FIA saw, what Ferrari modified, why the diffuser is so critical, and above all, what real consequences this investigation could have for the start of the season. During that second week, Ferrari introduced modifications that brought the volume and geometry of the diffuser to the exact limit allowed by the regulations. It's not that they added a scandalous piece at first glance. What they did was integrate, merge and extend surfaces that already existed within a legal framework, but taking them to a level of sophistication that changed the way air came out of the flat bottom. As stated in the base document, the FIA went from a simple preliminary approval in CAD to a much more in-depth analysis on the track after seeing the complete package operating under real conditions. The critical point was not only the shape of the diffuser, but how it interacted with other elements. In the second week, a small profile appeared located just behind the exhaust, officially framed within the permitted area of the rear impact structure. On paper, it is a static piece, legal and within the established dimensions. But on the track its behavior could be much more relevant, acting as a conditioner of the flow of hot gases coming out of the exhaust, strategically directing them towards the diffuser to energize the flow and stabilize the rear load under acceleration. And this is where the line between brilliant innovation and regulatory risk starts to blur. The FIA does not investigate an isolated plane. Investigate the set. Investigate whether the sum of the parts creates an effect that, although each component separately complies with the regulation, in combination generates something that the spirit of the standard tries to avoid. In this case, the suspicion revolves around whether this diffuser deflector exhaust integration could behave as a functional extension of the diffuser or as a system that amplifies the effect of the exhaust gases beyond what is permitted. We are not talking about declared illegality, but rather a gray area that has historically been extremely sensitive. And it is important to understand why this is so delicate. The diffuser is the heart of rear downforce. It is the piece that determines how much air can expand under the car and how efficiently. The more efficient this expansion is, the greater the depression under the flat bottom, and therefore the greater the grip without penalizing too much resistance. If Ferrari has managed to increase this efficiency thanks to the integration of surfaces and the thermal management of the exhaust flow, the advantage would not be marginal. It would be structural, affecting traction, tire wear and stability when exiting corners. What changes the tone of the story in this second week is not a formal protest from another team, nor an immediate disqualification. It is the fact that the FIA decided to review volumes, joints and dynamic behavior on the track in more detail. That means something caught enough attention to go beyond digital analysis. And when that happens in pre-season, it usually anticipates two possible scenarios. Either the concept is validated and Ferrari obtains a huge psychological and technical advantage, or a technical directive is issued that forces this solution to be reinterpreted or limited before the first Grand Prix. This is the starting point of the conflict. A risky technical bet in the second week of Bahrain, an FIA that decides to take a closer look, and a team that could have found gold or have built its performance on a too fragile foundation. The first thing to understand is that the FIA does not act by intuition, it acts when something breaks the expected pattern. In this second week, Ferrari not only showed an aggressive geometry of the diffuser, but a much more refined integration with the rear wing supports and with that small profile located behind the exhaust. According to the base document, the organization went from a preliminary design approval to a detailed analysis on the track, reviewing volumes, joints and possible behaviors that could be interpreted as mobile aerodynamics or as a functional extension of the diffuser beyond what is permitted. This is where the technical conflict becomes narratively powerful. If the FIA determines that everything is within the regulations, Ferrari will not only keep the solution, but will force the rest of the teams to react. That means accelerated redesigns, changes to the development flow, and possibly a domino effect on the grid. But if the FIA issues a clarifying technical directive, even if it does not declare the current design illegal, Ferrari could be forced to modify that area before the official start of the season. And in Formula 1, touching the diffuser is not changing a screw. It is altering the aerodynamic base of the car. The problem is not just the part. It's the correlation. If the rear concept of the car has been designed around that extra efficiency of the diffuser energized by the exhaust flow, any limitation would force recalibration of heights, suspensions, load distribution, and general balance. That means going back to the wind tunnel, adjusting simulations, and, most critically, losing development time in a phase where every week counts. In addition, there is an inevitable political component. When a solution enters the gray area, rivals observe, ask questions, and pressure. Even if there is no formal public outcry, the simple fact that the FIA is investigating already generates noise in the paddock. And noise in Formula 1 is rarely innocent. If other teams feel that Ferrari has found a loophole that gives them an advantage in rear traction and stability, the technical debate could quickly escalate. Another key point is the impact on actual performance. If this solution improves acceleration stability thanks to the thermal management of the exhaust flow towards the diffuser, Ferrari could have a significant advantage in corner exit, rear tire management, and consistency in long stints. We are not talking about an isolated 10th in qualifying, but about a structural behavior of the car that affects the race pace. And that is precisely what the FIA wants to ensure does not cross the line of the spirit of the regulations. If the FIA concludes that the diffuser rear profile exhaust area assembly strictly complies with the dimensions, volumes, and definitions of the regulations, Ferrari will not only keep the part, but will have validated an extremely aggressive interpretation that will give it a brutal psychological and technical advantage before the start of the championship. It would mean that they have read the regulations better than anyone else in one of the most historically sensitive areas of the car. And that would force the rest of the teams to react immediately, diverting resources towards that area in the middle of a critical phase of development. But the opposite scenario is the truly explosive one. If the FIA issues a clarifying technical directive, even if it does not declare the current design illegal, Ferrari could be forced to modify this rear integration. And touching the diffuser is not a superficial adjustment. It is altering the aerodynamic heart of the car. It is changing how the air expands under the flat bottom, how the rear load is stabilized, and how the car pulls out of corners. It is breaking the correlation between wind tunnel, CFD, simulator, and track just before the season starts. And so we come to the end of this story that began in the second week of testing in Bahrain and that, although it has not yet been sentenced, has already left a clear mark in the paddock. Ferrari has decided to play at the finest limit of the technical regulations. What we have seen is not a confirmed violation. There is no sanction. There is no disqualification. What there is something more subtle and, in some ways, more disturbing. A deep investigation into a concept that pushes the margins of what is permitted. According to the analysis included in the base document, the FIA did not detect a direct illegality, but it did consider it necessary to review in detail the integration of the diffuser, the rear profiles, and the interaction with the exhaust area after the evolution presented in the second week in Bahrain. That already tells us something. It tells us that Ferrari has not been conservative. It has been ambitious. She has been aggressive. It has tried to extract every millimeter of performance possible in one of the most decisive areas of the car, the diffuser. And in modern Formula 1, when a team finds performance in a gray area, there are only two possible outcomes. Either that interpretation is validated and becomes a reference for everyone, or the regulations are adjusted and the advantage disappears before being consolidated. We are not talking about a simple update here. We are talking about the aerodynamic heart of the car. If the solution holds, Ferrari could have taken a huge strategic step before the season officially starts. But if the FIA decides to close that door through a technical directive, the impact will not be minor. It will force the rear base of the car to be reconsidered right at the most delicate moment of the year. The conclusion is clear. Ferrari has taken a calculated risk. He has opted for an extreme reading of the regulations in the second week of Bahrain. And now the championship starts with a technical unknown hanging over Maranello. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.